लास्ट टाइम आप करने वाले थे अरोरा जी, आप चैंट करेंगे।
पूजा, इसमें ना मुझे आवाज नहीं आ रही, कुछ आइडिया क्या कर सकता हूँ?
आप चैंट करेंगे हमारे साथ।
ये
अब आ रही है आवाज?
पता नहीं मैंने
पॉज हुआ
है
पॉज हुआ है।
इसको।
अच्छा अभी नहीं, मुझे लगता है कि पॉज हुई।
उससे कर लो। हाँ।
इसकी वॉल्यूम बटन कहाँ है?
वॉल्यूम ये है, ये
हाँ
ये टर्न ऑन करना।
Okay, Anya, you chant today.
ये ना
And we'll
आवाज में बिल्कुल वो थी।
कर दिया टर्न।
you can start because
हाँ अब
देवेन्द्र योगीन्द्रं नत्वा ज्ञानप्रदं गुरुं मुमुक्षूणां हितार्थाय तत्त्वबोधोऽभिधीयते। नित्यं शुद्धं निराभासं निराकारं निरञ्जनं नित्यबोधं चिदानन्दं गुरुं ब्रह्मानमामि।
sadhana chatushaya sampanna
साधनचतुष्टय सम्पन्ना
karinam
अधिकारिणा
moksha sadhana bhutam
मोक्षसाधनभूतम्
tattva viveka prakaram
तत्त्वविवेकप्रकारम्
vakshyamaha
वक्ष्यामः।
sadhana chatushayam kim
साधनचतुष्टयं किम्
nitya vastu vivekaha
नित्यानित्यवस्तुविवेकः
ihamutrartha phala bhoga viragaha
इह पत्रफलभोगविरागः
ihamutrartha phala bhoga viragaha
इह पत्रमत्भोगविरागः
samadhi shatka sampattihi
समाशक्तिसम्पत्तिः
mumukshutvam cheti
मुमुक्षुत्वं चेति
नित्यवस्तु विवेकः कः
नित्यानित्यवस्तुविवेकः कः
नित्यवस्त्वेकं ब्रह्म
नित्यवस्तुविवेकं ब्रह्म
तद्व्यतिरिक्तं सर्वमनित्यम्
अनरिविक्तं सत्यविविक्तम्
तद्व्यतिरिक्तं सर्वमनित्यम्
तत्त्वनित्यं सत्यमविक्तम्
सर्वमनित्यम्
सर्वनमित्यम्
सर्वमनित्यम्
सर्वमनित्यम्
अयमेव नित्यवस्तु विवेकः
अयमेव नित्यवस्तुविवेकः
विरागः कः
विरागः कः
इह स्वर्गभोगेषु इच्छाराहित्यम्
इह भर्गविक्षु
इह स्वर्गभोगेषु इच्छाराहित्यम्
इह स्वर्गभोगिक्षुराहित्यम्
किं नाम वैराग्यम्
किं नाम वैराग्यम्
अदृढरागद्वेषवत्वम्
अदृगरागदेष्ववत्यम्
अदृढरागद्वेषवत्वम्
अधिग्रागद्वेषवित्यम्
अदृढ
अदृढ
रागद्वेषवत्
रागद्वेषवत् त्वम्
शोभना अध्यास
शोभना अध्यास
आरके अरोरा जी आपका माइक ऑन है
ऑन है? अच्छा सॉरी,
हाँ
मैं
जी।
सॉरी।
Diptiji, there's a lag today again in the video.
Oh, is it?
Because right now it's come on what is Vairagaha. Like now it's reached that Vairagaha kaha.
Oh, I think my internet has.
That's why I couldn't recite properly.
Right. Okay, so I think it's going. Just follow me. I'll repeat. Iha mutrartha phala bhoga viraga.
पत्र भोग
Iha mutra artha
इहामुत्र अर्थ
phala bhoga
फल भोग
viragaha.
विरागः
Iha swarga
इह स्वर्ग
bhogeshu
भोगेषु
इच्छाराहित्यम्.
इच्छाराहित्यम्.
So we will. The audio doesn't have a lag, right?
No.
I'll continue. So we are on a second discipline necessary for self-maturity. I'm replacing the words a little bit so that we expand our vision also. Self-disciplines help in what? In self-maturity. Again, maturity is an English term, undefined or variously defined, or subjectively it can be defined. But in Vedanta, we have a very definite definition or an understanding of what we call as maturity. Maturity is the maturity of your antakaranam. You will get to know more as you proceed in the text. Antakaranam basically is what as humans we call over here, अपने brain के अंदर हम सोचते हैं कि over here is my mind, and mind is what we just take it as our identity, where we feel our own sense, where we feel who we are in association with the body. So maturity to us in the Vedic culture is where when your physical body has an automatic process of growth in it, It has the sixfold changes in it from birth up to death. The body has in itself an ingrained mechanism with which it goes through the changes, but the mind in itself is not programmed. The body is programmed, but the mind is not programmed to grow along with the growth of the body. The growth of the mind is left to individual efforts. And what are the kind of efforts? Various kinds of efforts are understood in normal terms, but generalizing them all, they will fall in the category of discipline in English, and we call them as mandatory for your inner maturity, the mind maturity, the person maturity, means the growth of the person, the growth of the mind in the person. So what really constitutes to the full growth of the human being was first his capacity to think accurately, think clearly, think objectively, think keeping a neutral stance. And neutral stance means keeping your own individual viewpoint aside and to be able to assess or find facts or data or discern, think, despite your own individual data or point being separate from it. This capacity is very unique to human maturity. I'm calling it as maturity. It is a discipline because not every living being has developed it as much or has found himself to be able to think so intricately as a human being has been able to think. And Veda helps us to understand what that thinking process is, culminating itself in the capacity to very minutely discern what is real and what is unreal. When you see in a mix of haze, when there is a haze, if anybody has traveled, especially in hill stations in winter seasons and at night, and especially on the highways, I only have an experience 20 years ago where the street lights were not yet so fully there as now. And there was a fog. It was around 24th or 25th of December in North India. And there was a fog there on the highway. And you could hardly see a few meters ahead, just a few feet ahead probably. It engulfed in fog. Now, the only thing that was helping the driver there was his capacity, his experience, his capacity to be able to find any shadow which could indicate that there is some object or being ahead to steer his vehicle. This is what we say is what the world represents to a human being. We see so much of data here, but it is also cloudy. Cloudy in the sense that there's not much clarity about anything as is definite basis. So what the mind feels really is a whole lot of mix of data. The capacity to very minutely discern the real from the shadow. What the senses present to us seem to be extremely concrete and real because our senses are able to contact them. The reality seems to be caught up between the sense interaction. Find this word very careful. Sentence. The reality, our sense of reality, seems to be caught up between the senses and the sense object. This reality का sense is coming from the integration of the sense experience. Means senses and sense objects are bringing a sense experience to the mind, and that sense experience is what is where our sense of reality is caught up. इन दोनों के बीच में sandwiched है, as if इन पे dependent है. Because when I don't have my senses, I don't perceive a sense of reality, like in my deep sleep. In my sleep state, I don't find a sense of reality while I am sleeping. I don't feel there was real sleep in sleep. I don't have the experience of sleep as sleep in sleep, just as I have the experience of waking in waking. I'm there as a waker and I'm experiencing the waking world. I have the experience of myself experiencing the waking world. This sense of me experiencing the waking world is where I am calling it as real. I'll repeat myself. The sense of reality is caught up between the senses and the sense objects. का जो experience result हो रहा है. That means मेरी आँख जो color और रूप को देख रही है, pardon my voice, I hope it's audible and clear. जो मेरी आँख color and रूप को देख रही है, उसके my eye is here, the object is there according to me. Yet, the experience is my experience as sense experience. I see color, I see a form, I see a shape. This seeingness is what is a sense experience, based on sense experience. If you remove the sense objects and the senses are there is no sense experience. If you remove the senses and the sense object are there, there's no verification of it. You cannot verify that there is a sense object because, there is no sense experience. This sense of reality is caught up as if between sense and sense object, bringing a sense experience which seems to be mixing up with my cognition of what is real. I'm calling it real because that is my experience. A sense experience is my experience, and therefore it happens to be real to me. Vedanta says this entire sense experience is a shadow. Take the example of the fog. There is only fog. Means you'll have to discern that there are objects there and there is a sense of non-recognition of them. This sense and sense experience based experience of reality is actually the fogginess, is actually the shadow, is actually the snake in the rope snake example. My sense of reality by default, I lend it to unaware, unrecognized. I lend it to the sense experience. This is very, very subtle and it's discerning. It breaks through. The breakthrough. That I feel the world is real. एक आभास, एक real, ना real लगता है. If I don't get something that I wanted here, मुझे दुख होता है, और अगर मुझे कुछ मिलता है तो मुझे चाहिए, मुझे सुख होता है. Means that sense of reality that I have feelingly sandwiched between these two. That sense of reality, my dependency on it is so much that I am dependent on my gains and losses, on my honor and my dishonor, on my fulfillment and lack of fulfillment, on whatever this world is representing to me or whatever the world is presenting to me. बस इसी पे मेरा सुख और दुख आधारित रह गया. It is based only on sense experience that I call myself a happy person or an unhappy person, a miserable person, dejected person, etc. This sense of reality caught up between the two. Vedanta says maturity of a human being is कि वो shadow को अलग कर सकता है. मतलब sense of reality in sense experience base पे सिर्फ नहीं है. In fact है ही नहीं. Sense experience is a mere shadow of a real experience. And a real experience, the real in the experience, which I experience only as a division, the real of that experience is the one who survives untouched by every experience that the senses have. Repeating myself, I experience senses, sense experience, and I call it real. This Vedanta says needs examination. इस पे थोड़ा विचार जरूरी है, इसको विवेक करना पड़ेगा. Is my reality, is it only dependent upon sense experience? My idea of reality, my experience of reality furthermore, क्या ये सिर्फ इंद्रिय जनित हो सकती है? जनित means born of a sense contact. क्या ये सिर्फ इंद्रियों के व्यवहार पे मेरा मैं का होने का या मेरा idea of reality, let me stick to that much first, that I call the world real. This real is what Vedanta says. If you find yourself quiet enough and qualified enough to begin that inquiry, ये real की क्या मैं objectively inquiry कर सकती हूँ या सकता हूँ? And when I start that inquiry, I first understand that my sense experience based sandwiched reality is certainly not real, because that I conclude that those experiences give me happiness or sorrow is where it disqualifies itself. Sense based experience पे जो हम एक आरोपण कर देते हैं, सिर्फ sense based experience है तो there'll be likes or there'll be dislikes. Ideally speaking, they are just reporters, but we don't stop at it. Somehow the likes and dislikes get translated on them. And we did that in detail from Shobhana Adhyasa, how we transfer our own want of fulfillment or our own want of happiness on them, on the sense objects. This reality, Vedanta says, Vedas say, जब इंसान मैच्योर हो रहा है अंदर से, शरीर तो अपने आप हो रहा है, लेकिन जब उसका human development at the level of his mind is completing itself, he will find himself questioning, capable of questioning very subtle facts and also arriving at the answers with the help of a little guidance here and there. So, wo jo Vivek was the first part of your discipline that makes the human mind matured. The second discipline, which we are already seeing and connected to the first discipline, is Vairagya. I can only begin such a subtle inquiry when I'm not caught up in the senses and the sense experience. Isn't it true? If I'm already caught up in the sense experience, then I am only affirming to myself likes and dislikes. मुझे पसंद है, मुझे पसंद नहीं है, मुझे अच्छा लग रहा है, मुझे अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है, मुझे ये चाहिए, मुझे ये नहीं चाहिए, मुझे वो बड़ा goes on. It seems to be very exciting, no doubt, and it's vyavaharically very beautiful because it's nice. That's all. We leave it at it's nice. It's vyavaharically acceptable and it's very nice. But while it is there vyavaharically, the mind of the person, the antakaran of the person, the thinking of the person is very clear that these experiences based on my likes and dislikes are mere shadows. They are not there substantial. They are not there in solidarity. They're actually not solid. They're actually not there. By the time you begin to see, when we start this thinking or learning or hearing for the first time, it's not acceptable to us that my sense experience is not solid experience. It takes a lot of repetitive thinking. And I say a lot, depending on each person. But for me, I would go by lot is better to add on a lot of thinking inside. When you start appreciating that a sense experience is not solid, real नहीं है, ये actually में appearing है, ये actually में सिर्फ लग रहा है, एक temporary experience है. What is temporary experience? It is shanikam. Shanikam means एक पल में है, next पल नहीं है. By the time I have had my chocolate, by the time I have tasted my chocolate and I have even said I like it, the experience is already vanishing. So the happiness that I got from that experience is already diminishing as the contact keeps growing. The happiness is diminishing to the extent that by the time the chocolate is finished, actual happiness is finished. There is only a lingering memory of the happiness that I had. It's already a past tense, no longer my present experience. And because it is not my present experience, I am only living in a past memory of an experience. I am not seeing, or I am attached to it. I'm clinging to it because the fact is I don't have that sensory experience now of the chocolate. This is an example. Just an example. So when I am moving from Viveka, Aditi, your mic is on. So when I'm moving from Viveka, I begin to understand or appreciate that unless and until I have grown above certain weaknesses in the form of raga and dvesha, mujhe chahiye, longing for something in which I have caught my sense of reality. ये बहुत real है, इतना real है कि मुझे चाहिए. First time I went to a beach in Bombay. First time, and I saw a shellfish. It evoked some sort of a idea of a beauty to me. It was so beautiful. It was actually one of the shapes which had some hole in it. And as kids, if I held it there, it made a T. So it became even more subjective because it was T. So the first shell I picked up in my life was actually a P, but I made an excuse that since I'm holding it, that now it has become a D, and it became very beautiful to me. It was soft, it was small, it was soft, and I kept it for very, very, very long because I wanted to understand where is this idea of beauty suddenly emerging on a shell piece. It's just a shell, and a shell has there is a hole. At that age, of course, you don't know so much of biology or things like that. It's a shell, and a shell, beautiful indeed, but the subjectivity of the beauty's enhancement because I associated it with my first initial, my name, D. Suddenly, that object is very beautiful. Suddenly, I want to hold on to that object. Suddenly, that object is giving me something that if I'm not careful of, I am going to hold a lot of objects because something or the other is always going to give me some sort of happiness. Something or the other is always going to be something make it appear that it is giving me a reflection of my own self. I'm using a lot of words, I hope. What is that which projected into that sense experience? If my name did not start with D, if the name started with P, my name was something else. It started with P. If my name started with P, how would I have held that? I would not have held it like this. I would have held it like this. Why? Object is the same. If my name started with anything, M, D, C, N, S, anything, what would that object really be? Would it have the same impact that this had to me at that time? It wouldn't. To each one of us, it would be different. This capacity to not be involved with sense experience, which we are by default constantly imposing on the sense experiences, जिसको हमने शोभना अध्यास कहा है. The capacity to not impose on it, that capacity makes a person extremely strong mentally. Matures the person is the right word, because I'll rephrase this, that capacity to not impose on the sense experience any of your subjectivity on it is called Vairagyam. My capacity to just take an experience as is. Aake jaane do. Untouched. It's coming. Vyavharically, everything's beautiful. Vyavaharically, everything needs to be done as is. There are different relations in the world. You have to maintain the relations as they are. They're good people, they're bad, etc. Doesn't matter. There is profit, there is loss. सब कुछ बाहर मतलब दुनिया में व्यवहारिक दृष्टि से सब कुछ जैसा है, उसके अपने नियमों में अपने आप को, that's a different thing. That's in fact height of objectivity, if one can. That's the pinnacle of maturity. Vyavaharically, what Vyavahar needs to be done, like Krishna supposing, Lord Krishna. What does he do? He doesn't have the same contact with everybody because he's Bhagwan. He could have had the same contact saying, all beings are my beings, all people are my people, मैंने ही तो जन्म दिया है, मेरी ही तो सृष्टि है, मेरा ही तो जगत है. And he being say Vishnu Avatar himself, he could have easily said, मैं ही तो स्थिति करता हूँ, यहाँ पे कौन अच्छा है, कौन बुरा है. You can go into anything, but you'll miss the point. What is the point? Even when Bhagwan himself comes as Krishna, his contact with Kauravas and Duryodhanas is not the same. Period. That's the learning. जो जैसा जहाँ कोई discernment है, to be able to recognize things as they are. When you recognize them as they are, you cannot have the same contact with a tiger or with a lamb. Physically, you cannot have the sense contact, cannot be the same, but the mental contact can be the same. The sense contact cannot be the same because to a tiger, you cannot pet the tiger, but to a lamb, you can go and pet a lamb. You can do all that playfulness with a lamb, but dare not go near a tiger unless you're a trained one. Even then, be careful. But in your mind, in your own self, that they are beings of equal value. This can remain as is in your thinking, in your attitude, in your beautiful word is भावना. आपकी भावना में बदलाव की जरूरत नहीं है, क्योंकि एक टाइगर है और एक लैम्ब है. टाइगर एंड लैम्ब के लिए भावना आपकी सेम रह सकती है, मगर आपका फिजिकल कांटेक्ट सेम ना रहे. That means what Vedanta says, most often, I will not generalize it or saying it generally, most often is at the level of your mind. It's not at the level of your contact, physical. Therefore, don't mistake certain values at the level of physical experience. So when we say that Vairagyam means your mind is holding sense experiences in the same value, giving it the same value, giving it the same value as in your mind, but that respectively, relatively, they have different places, just as a glass is a different place and a pot has a different place in the world. That relativity of understanding where that value is, placing the right value to them, but in your mind, that placement of the right value is actually from the fact that it is all neutral. It is all at the level of saying that mind has no subjective imposition on it. Vairagya wo hai. That is a state of discipline. That is a state of practice, as we said in the previous classes, practice which yoga school of thought emphasizes on Vairagyam and Abhyas, based on Vivek. Your Vivek Drishti makes the limb of Vairagyam stronger, and your Vairagyam strengthens your Vivek Drishti, and both together have the bridge in between of practice, which makes the value become real. From the intellect, it moves on. From just knowing, it moves on to transforming. I say from knowing to transforming Because once a thing is seen, like I say, sometimes these things may take time, but when it clinches, you will always say, ये पहले क्यों नहीं देखा? Just as my favorite example, gravity, Earth is square. The first time you heard that it was discovered Earth is round, and that before people thought Earth was square. The minute it was discerned that it is round, you wonder how did we even think it was square, etc. It's only when you get the correct knowledge that you start seeing it as so simple and as so real that you wonder how did you not see it before. In fact, I always say वो kind of एक लक्षण बन जाता है उसका. जब आपको पास सही दृष्टि आती है तो मन में एक बात आ जाती, अब दिखती वैसे है तो आपको लगने लगता है कि अरे ये पहले क्यों नहीं ऐसे दिख रही थी. हैरानी होती है कि दिखी क्यों नहीं इतने टाइम पर. जस्ट एज आज अगर सेंस एक्सपीरियंस बहुत रियल लगता है, लगता है आफ्टर नोइंग ऑल दिस ऑल्सो, ऐसा नहीं है कि एकदम से नहीं लगेगा, but धीरे 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 when the shadow starts to diminish itself, means that reality gets assigned to the right place and not to the sense experience based place. Where is the reality? What is the reality? That develops some sort of a detachment from the sense experience की dependency. I hope the class thought flow is clear. Sense experience will not stop, but the dependency of the happiness that we had from it means अगर मेरा सेंस कांटेक्ट मेरे राग द्वेष के बीच में है तो मुझे अच्छा लग रहा है, अगर नहीं आ रहा तो मुझे बुरा लग रहा है. जब इंद्रियों का कांटेक्ट हुआ अपने रिस्पेक्टिव ऑब्जेक्ट्स के साथ और वो प्लेजेंट और अनप्लेजेंट सेंसेशन दे रहे हैं, उस पे मैंने सुख और दुख किया और फिर मैंने कहा मैं सुखी और मैं दुखी. मैं सुखी और मैं दुखी का कनेक्शन काट देते हैं विवेक से. जब ये कटता है so that is called Vairagyam. That is in English term, a mild term it is, and sometimes a very misleading term, but there is no equivalent to Vairagyam in English. So the best word is detachment. Detachment has its own connotations in English. That is not what we in Vedas and Vedanta in Vedic culture ever talk of, because only in Vedic culture do we talk of duties. And where there is indifference, as what detachment in English conveys sometimes to people, there automatically what gets conveyed is indifference to duties. Shastra ye vidya de hi nahi sakti. There is no indifference towards any living being. Forget duties. There is no indifference to even the smallest of living being. But there is detachment. There is Vairagyam. That Vairagyam means while I can have the greatest connect with the entire life form, I still don't forget that anything outside that appears outside, everything that is sense contact based is going to be temporary. ये दृष्टि जाती नहीं है, established हो गई है. You are established in that processing of thought and you have clinched it with your sense of identity. Now you begin to see it as real. आपको doubt नहीं आ रहा है. क्यों? Because fact है ना. Fact में आप dismiss ही नहीं कर सकते. आप project कर सकते हो, and when you project it and see something else, then that it will be correctable is always going to be the probability, and that correctability always says that it's not real. Anything that can be correctable will cease to have reality at another point of time. Whatever becomes correctable means कल को अगर मैं आज की सोच को कल correct कर रही हूँ, that means मेरी आज की sense of reality उसमें is not really real. It's abhas, it's temporary, it's imposed. This what he says over here कि वैराग्यम जीव में जब, और ये सिर्फ ह्यूमन बींग्स में पॉसिबल है, blessed life forms somehow have it in default for their self-protection and survival. But human beings, mind, antakaran, is very complex because there is much more self-awareness in a human being. Because of the self-awareness possibility that has come up in this form, this self-awareness holds on to a lot of things in us. हर चीज जो पसंद आई एकदम से वो पकड़ के सेंस ऑफ रियलिटी बन जाती है. My words will also probably not convey as best as that. Probably you can understand it, you will see it. That sense of reality जो बंध जाती है एक्सपीरियंस के बीच में, सेंस एक्सपीरियंस के बीच में. आई एम स्टिकिंग टू द कॉन्टेक्स्ट टुडे. एक सेंस बेस्ड एक्सपीरियंस में जो पकड़ लेती है एक रियलिटी, सेंस ऑफ रियलिटी. दिस इज व्हाट इज संसार. दिस इज व्हाट इज शास्त्र सेज is the root cause of my unhappiness. Any amount felt, even इतना सा अगर पूरे जीवन में हमें कभी फील हुआ है, supposing I'm one of those people, if on the yardstick of 0 to 100, as therapists, we have this pain scale 0 to 10. So supposing I convert it into a happiness scale, supposing there was a happiness scale of 0 to 100, and you were to put your number on it, for assessment, 0 is no happiness and 100 is always. I've never known what unhappiness is. I've never known what sorrow is. I've never known what grief is. I've never known sadness is. I've never known misery is. I've never known anger. I've never known irritation. I've never known jealousy. I've never known envy. I've never ever known incompleteness. That is 100. Supposing I tell myself I'm 99.9. Supposing. Let's just suppose. Supposing I say I'm 99.9 happy person. Even that little 0.1%, that unhappiness ka principle is not different from 0% of unhappiness. What is that principle, or 0% of happiness? What is that principle? That principle is my sense of reality. I have somehow mixed it up with my sense experience. So while sense experience come and go, while they can give me pleasant sensation or unpleasant sensation, because ये तो senses का sense object के साथ का वार्तालाप है, इंद्रियों का इंद्रियों के गुणों के साथ वार्तालाप है. आंखें सिर्फ देख सकती हैं और वही वो सुन नहीं सकती है. कान सिर्फ सुन सकता है, देख नहीं सकता है. तो आंखें अपने रंग और रूप से सिर्फ बातें कर रही है. One of the poet puts it like that. There's a conversation going on between eyes and color and form. There's a conversation going on between ear and sound. There is a conversation going on between tongue and taste. There is a conversation going on between touch and skin. There is just a conversation going on between the 5 smell, nose and smell, between the 5 organs of perception and their respective objects. वार्तालाप हो रहा है, बातचीत कर रहे हैं. लेकिन इसमें मैं फंसी. क्यों फंसी या फंसा? क्योंकि मेरे को वो जो वार्तालाप कर रहे हैं आपस में, उनका एक अपना, how you talk and there are some nice conversations, some not so pleasant conversations. उनका कुछ आपस में like square and circle. Some pegs fit, some don't fit. Some इंद्रियों के अपने गुणों में उसको कुछ अच्छा लगता है, कुछ अच्छा नहीं लगता है. वो pleasant, unpleasant is only for the survival of the body. That there are something, some time back I had a terrible food poisoning. I never had such a terrible food poisoning. It was terrible food poisoning. I mean, the minute I tasted, it was a very rare food. I just recently got to know that there are certain bottle gourds, ghia, loki, which also can produce poisoning. This particular lot, first time, I never heard of it. We've eaten it all our life. Vegetarians would eat it all their life. The minute I tasted it, it had some very strange bitter, so bitter it was that I wanted to throw it up. And I just tasted it. It was one of the, I make it very rarely, so it was one of those rare dishes Gujaratis make. So I was making, the minute I put it in my mouth, it was very unpleasant. But the hard work went in it. And the fact that, you prepared it, and how can you waste it, and things like that. I just thought maybe hoga kuch something. Couldn't bother to think beyond. What superseded was the fact that I have put in so much effort and that there's probably nothing else to eat at that time. Let me just eat it and let me just forget about it. It's like, hoga I must put some more of some ingredients, which I don't know what it is. Who bothers to think so much? Because there's so much other to think about. So I just had a few pieces. Sure enough, it was so bad that the first time I felt what it can mean to be poisoned, close to that, it would be sheer anugraha that some antibiotic would work on you. Something worked because there's no way you would have gone to the hospital. You just think it's a stomach cramp. You think it's this, it is that, it is that. Something had to prevail at that time to say, okay, I need to have a medicine. And sure enough, the way the body threw up, the unpleasantness, don't get involved in my example. The point I'm conveying is the senses and the sense object gave an unpleasant experience for who's sick, for the sake of the survival of the body. That is ingrained knowledge. Why I say for the survival of the body is because I'm saying it from the higher Vedantic standpoint. Because the conscious being तो उससे अलग है ही है. अगर शरीर गिर भी जाता है तो वो तो है. वो तो ना मरेगा ना जिंदा है ना कुछ भी है. It's like वो कहीं नहीं जा रहा है. वो तो है. हाँ, शरीर गिर जाएगा. So the pleasant and the unpleasant sensations sometimes can be very advantageous for the sake of giving information of what is good for the body and what is not good for the mind, for the body, in terms of what will promote its health and what will not promote its health. Maybe the body has in its DNA, I will say, it has in its genome that information built over generations of survivals. Body has it stored in it that what will protect the body. The unpleasant experience, the minute I touched it, if I had abandoned it because I had gone through the viveka for it, that what am I doing? Doesn't seem to be palatable. If it's not palatable, it may be something that I don't know about. Why don't I just throw it up? Wisdom should say, rather than body throwing it out, let me throw the food out. I could have saved myself a lot of agony, physical agony. That unpleasant experience, if I have to conclude and tell myself that I am an unpleasant person or I'm an unhappy person, Vedanta says, bas usko hata lo. Sense experience by itself is informative. But to conclude on it, to say कि ये ही मेरे आनंद का source है. If I get my chocolate, only I will be happy, and I long for my next chocolate. If I get my cherished object of being, only then I will be happy. Else I'll be miserable. If you see all the accounts of misery in the world, I'm not going to happiness still. If you see all the counts of misery in the world, all of them will be based on something that is sensory based experience. And all the happiness that beings account for is also sense based happiness. वेदांता कहता है ग्रो अप थोड़ा सा, फिर बड़े हो जाओ, बहुत हो गया, मतलब बच्चे करें तो ठीक है. In an adult body also you still want sense happiness, and you grow up a little bit more. And what is that little bit more growth? See, it's just sense happiness. It will be temporary. It is going to be मिली तो मिली, नहीं मिली तो नहीं मिली, ठीक है, कुछ ना कुछ मिलती रहती है. 5 इंद्रिया है. There's a lot more into the topic. I will, time's up, but I'm connecting it to the next few classes also. So please bear in mind, I may not be able to repeat everything because the thought flow there gets lost. Bear with this part of it. Bear it in the sense, remember it. That I am actually lost what I was saying. And just tell me where was my last sentence before I just said this. Important. Connecting to the neutral. Correct. That I am able to tell myself that sensory based experience is just a temporary experience. That आएगा तो जाएगा. First of all, अगर खुशी लाया है तो हमेशा तो रहने नहीं वाली है. कभी ना कभी तो डिमिनिशिंग शुरू हो ही जाएगी, कितनी भी लंबी क्यों ना हो वो आनंद का फेज. डिमिनिश तो हो ही रहा है, और जो डिमिनिश हो रहा है वो अंत होगा ही होगा. At the same time, the person who has Vairagyam will always understand. वो समझ में आता है, एक इंद्रिय का विषय खत्म हो रहा है तो 5 इंद्रिय दिए है ना. इस शरीर में तो 5 इंद्रियों का सुख है. एक आती है, दूसरी जाती है, एक आती है, but there'll never be a time when you don't have some indriya sukh or the other. कुछ तो मिलता रहता है. But must I spend a whole life या पूरा जीवन एक इंद्रिय से दूसरे इंद्रिय, like a tennis ball from here to there, backed around, or on a badminton court, or on a table tennis? That's even worse because the ball is choti. Lawn tennis also जोर से पड़ती है. Back from here to there, dependent on the sense. एक तरफ sense organ है, एक तरफ sense object है, बीच में मेरी खुशी, कभी इधर कभी उधर, कभी इधर कभी उधर. Am I going to be such a vulnerable person as a human being? Vedanta says, Veda says, Veda's vision, Vedanta culminates and says, you can grow up. Grow up to what? Develop that control back in yourself. That developing the control back in it means utilizing the Viveka Shakti to unentangle this dependency on the sense experience. And to the extent you are unentangling it, that's called Vairagyam. And Vairagyam is Sukh, is real Sukh. A Sukh because Indriya Janit to aega jayega. क्योंकि जहां इंद्रिय जनित सुख है वो the minute it diminishes it replaces itself with its opposite. So, but when you've grown above it, that anand, which is actually neither sukh nor dukh, कोई word ही नहीं है, just your being, and that being is only anand sabhav, which you are coming closer towards. So Vairagyam is that. And this is further said in few verses. I'll skip this for now. We just touched upon it. We may touch upon it later. But this Vairagyam, I'll take 2 more minutes. Use this. This Vairagyam, Shastras, just for the sake of students, just for the sake of learning, just for the sake of self-acknowledgement, self-honesty, just for the sake of self-honesty, because no one can say this for another person. Only you can say this for yourself. You can recognize it for yourself. Shastra only for that sake. The acharyas, not even Shastra. The lineage of acharyas have qualified it, and more particularly the yoga school of thought. Patanjali Sutras have sutras there where they say, what is the intensity of Vairagyam? I wanted to type here types of Vairagyam. You can write here. The intensity of Vairagyam is what grades the Vairagyam, the gradation of Vairagyam. Kitna develop ho gaya? We are talking about development. We are talking about maturity. So what is there in maturity? You know, when your body is young, small, okay, baby, toddler, infant, toddler, young to middle-aged to old age, the 6 stages of the body that it goes through. While your mind is maturing through the 6 stages of the body, and you can change many bodies in the process before your mind can really mature itself. That's Vedanta Drishti, that's Vedic Drishti. जरूरी नहीं कि एक ही शरीर में आप सारा growth ले लो. Not necessary. You may change many bodies in the process, but there will be a gradation always of your growth of your own antakaranam. And that gradation is your, from Viveka developed real Vairagyam. And the gradation of Vairagyam is threefold. Manda, Madhyam, Tibra. What is a Manda Vairagyam? What is Madhyam category of Vairagyam? And what is Tibra Vairagyam? The 3 categories, again I'm repeating myself, is not for with the right word, is not for judging someone else, is not for self-judging yourself. It's not, it's just a quality to recognize. Honesty, that's all. It just says for an honest evaluation of oneself. And that evaluation is important because that will define hugely your course of life. Vastly the decisions you make in life. Vastly the direction you will give to your life will actually depend upon how much of what grade of Vairagyam one holds in oneself. How your life you will shape will depend upon this. This we will touch upon and explain this a little before moving onwards. This will still take another 2, 3, 4 classes before the topic gets concluded. We'll end here. We'll end the class here. Sarve Santa Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhave.